Welcome to China Today. I'm Li Li from Guangxi Normal University. In this section, I'm going to introduce to you classic literature still cherished today. This lecture covers an overview of classic literature, the book of songs, tongue poems, and song lyrics. An overview of classic literature. Chinese literature is one of the major literary heritages of the world, with an uninterrupted history of more than 3,000 years. Reverence for the past has influenced the preservation of these culture sources. There were a variety of literary genres in ancient China. The principal genre of classic Chinese literature is poetry. Early folk songs, as in the Book of Songs, in pre-Qin period, established the Shi form, which crystallized during the Han Dynasty and dominated for the next 1,200 years. The short story, which began to develop during the Tang Dynasty, at first emphasized either historical events or supernatural happenings. Through centuries of development, the notion of fiction culminated in China's greatest classic novels in Ming and Qing dynasties, such as A Dream of Red Mansions, A Journey to the West, etc. The high point of Chinese classic drama was in the Yuan dynasty. Thousands of years elapsed. Classic literature is still cherished by Chinese people today. In the textbooks of Chinese language and literature in schools at primary and secondary levels, the poetic works, together with pieces from other genres of classic literature, are included. Before starting to learn Chinese characters, Chinese kids usually start to recite classic poetry during kindergarten years, or even earlier. What's more, the figures and the stories from renowned classic novels are constant fountains for TV dramas and films in China today. The Book of Songs. Shi Jing, translated as the Book of Songs or Classic of Poetry, is the earliest anthology of poetry in the Chinese tradition. It recorded a total of 305 poems created over a period of 500 years or so. It was said that specific officials were appointed with a sole role of collecting poems among the mass, and they were required to compose poems and present them to the emperor at that time. The anthology came into being after further compilation. It was said that all the poems in the Book of Songs were lyrics of the ancient days. The collection of 305 poems ranged from 6 to 120 lines long, with as few as 2 and as many as 9 syllables per line. Most lines contain 4 syllables. Shi Jing is regarded as the founding work and the source of the Chinese literary tradition. Many poems in this collection depicted the genuine social pictures at the time of their compilations. Among them, many pieces were devoted to love and marriage between the young. Some poems portrayed the hard life of social underclass. Some reflected the general public's resistance to oppression and aspiration for freedom and happiness. Others denounced the war and the sufferings caused by it. Homecoming After War, 采薇, is one representative example of the war-resistant poems. Let's appreciate a selection from this poem. 昔我往矣，杨柳依依，今我来思，雨雪霏霏。行道迟迟，载渴载饥，我心伤悲，莫知我哀。When I left here, willows shed a tear. I come back now, snow bends the bough. Long, long the way, hard, hard the day. My grief overflows. Who knows? Who knows? Here is the movie version of this poem. I hope you would enjoy. The Book of Songs was not only a valuable resource for studying ancient Zhou society, but also the fountainhead of Chinese poetry in later times, in terms of both its ideological and artistic achievements. As a tradition of well-educated Chinese, when naming their kids, parents in contemporary China are still inclined to find elegant characters or words in the lines of 诗经. Tang poems and song lyrics. Tang and Song dynasties witnessed the flowering of ancient Chinese poetry. Tang poems and song lyrics, or 唐诗宋词. The Tang dynasty is recognized as the golden age of poetry. This was a period of power and prosperity. Culture became more open and tolerant during the Tang, stimulating the development of poetry. Out of this period emerged Li Bai, the great poet of the Romantic school, and Du Fu, who emphasized realism. Being widely praised as the immortal of poems, 诗仙, Li Bai was a poet who abounded with passion and talent. In form, poetry of the Tang dynasty contained 4-line and 8-line verses with 5 or 7 characters in each line. 词 poetry, or lyrics, reached its peak in the Song dynasty. 词 goes by many names. Since it can be sung to music, it is called 词 lyrics. As the length of lines differ, it is also known as long and short line verses, or 长短句. 词 poetry has various patterns of tunes, such as the moon over the west, the river 西江月, the river all red, 满江红, and so on. Outstanding lyrics composers of the Song dynasty include 苏轼, Li Qingzhao, Xin Qiji, and many others. Let's appreciate a few lines from Prelude to Water Melody, 水调歌头, a lyrics work by Su Shi in the Northern Song dynasty. Prelude to Water Melody. Selection by Su Shi. When did the bright moon first appear? One cup in hand, I ask the blue sky. I do not know what time of year it would be tonight in the palace on high. Riding the wind, there I would fly, but I'm afraid the crystalline palace would be too high and too cold for me. 水调歌头节选，苏轼。明月几时有？把酒问青天。不知天上宫阙，今夕是何年？我欲乘风归去，又恐琼楼玉宇，高处不胜寒。起舞弄清影，何似在人间？ This masterpiece by Su Shi is still sung to new classic Chinese music today. Let's listen to the song. In summary, there were a variety of literary genres in ancient China. The brilliant literary works from the past are still cherished by the Chinese today. Dear students, this lecture comes to an end now. Meet you in the next one.